Hello and welcome to another ARCHLine.XP webinar. My name is Zoltán Tóth, and today we are going to take a look at outside and see how we can use terrain in ARCHLine. What we are going to learn about today is how to create them, how to edit them, and how to get calculations out of them. So let's take a look. As always, I'm joined by my colleague, Mr. Ilés Pap,
Hi there.
our resident architect, who is going to introduce us to the wonderful world of digital terrain models. Now, so far there were some scenarios and some shows before where we looked at terrain, but we never had one where we actually look at the whole thing from beginning to end. So can you tell us in a couple of words what exactly are we going to discuss today?
Well, this time we will try to cover things that we left off or left out at the other topics. We will try to cover fully how you can actually manually create terrains either by points or simply by following, tracing lines of an existing image or something. And then we will also show you how you can import files that contain terrain. If you get a file from the engineer who surveyed the terrain, and it will be likely in a file that you will be able to read in the software, and the software will automatically turn it into a terrain. We will discuss these formats. And then we will also talk about how the terrain and the building and the site and how these things connect together, and how to paint the terrain, how to add detail to the terrain, which is originally the landscape, but you will likely want to remove parts of that terrain or just simply adjust it to your needs. So we will cover those tools as well.
As always, you are welcome to ask your questions. You can do that on the right-hand side next to me. Ask your questions during the show. We are going to look at them as we proceed, and that way we can make the show even more relevant. I'm going to say hi in the chat bar now. That's where you can actually ask your questions. And now, without further ado, let's look at what we have here at hand. Let's look at first the basics. So when it comes to creating a terrain, what are the things, how do we get started?
Well, the terrain tool is in the building node, and it's actually right at the end. You will find these options coming in. Now, the first 3 or 4 is the one that you will use to create content, and the rest is to change the settings, change what you already have. Either it's the road or just the heights of the terrain, points or something like that. Now, to start with the basics, when you work with the terrain, just as in other cases, you have an option to set up the terrain material and things like that. So that's why we will see a terrain, how it looks like with that specific material, and so you can control that. And then when you start building up a terrain, either manually or by using a file, that information combined with the settings will build up a terrain. And when you would like to create a terrain, you can build it up from a file. This will be the following topic.
Yes,
and you can actually create it point by point if you have anything to trace, or you just you understand the size of the terrain that you would like to create, and then you just would like to build up something from scratch. You can do that. Now I will start with the one called terrain by points, which by default allows you to just simply pick a point on the drawing and then set up the height.
This is still in the 2D drawing panel, right?
Yes, that's right. Now we are in the 2D. And actually, there is one thing with the terrain. When you would like to set up the points, then you either trace an existing drawing, or you trace the contours of the building or something like that, or you can work with coordinates. If this is a coordinate at 0, 0, you can just now start typing, either deciding whether you locate in an absolute coordinate system or like the world coordinate system or a relative coordinate system, and then you can just decide where this location point is. If I'm about to work with coordinates instead of simply clicking, I just simply type the coordinates 0 space 0. That's the default way of telling.
So now the cursor is going to jump to that coordinate, and then you define the height value.
Yeah, that's right. Now when I hit enter, see there's 0, 0. Actually, it's already always marked with the 2 coordinates on your drawing. And then now you can set up what's the height of the level line or the point that you are about to create. Now, let's start with something simple. I will just literally create a slope, a terrain slope. And then, so for this reason, this terrain will start at, for example, 1 meter. And then now I'm about to create the following one. And again, I can just simply, click and tell where the following point is. I can use a coordinate, Or if I'm about to refer to an existing point,
Yes.
I can use, just as we used it before for many different purposes, I can use the reference point. So I can just tell, okay, I already have something here. That's the reference point. And
So now all the measurements are going to be done in relation to that.
yeah, and now I'm, just telling the software I'm going to the right, and I just, type, for example, 7,000. Now I'm working in millimeters, so 7,000, that's 7 meters. And then again, I type that, okay, this should go again to 1 meter, okay. And then from here, if I would like to go up, I just click here. And then now let's just move the mouse above and say, okay, this is 8,000, for example. And this is at, for example, let it be at 2 meters.
Some might argue that it might be easier to first sketch the boundaries of the terrain.
Yeah, that's also an option.
This is usually you would redraw something that is already there, data that you got from somebody else. But if you just want to design a terrain by your own, then this is the way to do it.
Yeah. In the meantime, I just created the fourth point. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Now they are very tiny, so I will also show you how you can make them much more visible. So now what we can see here is the 4 points, and then I just say, okay, I'm finished with this. I hit enter, and I hit enter to close it, or I could use the escape key.
How do you make a terrain out of this?
These 4 points. If I set up the 3D model, I can see the slope. But now the 2D is barely visible because they are literally dots there. And if you select the terrain, you will be able to control the pattern. You can set up a different way they look like, or just, for example, a different color. Let it be, for example, red, and maybe it's better visible in the 2D. Now it's not that much, but
it's tiny dots, but you can change the symbols to something else.
Now I will add 2 other points. So I would like to show you how you can extend an existing terrain. I just would like to add the breakpoint, for example, until this point it's a little bit higher, and then the slope decreases and changes. In that case, you can use the terrain, and there is the create, and you can add points to an existing terrain. In this case, the first thing you have to tell is which is the terrain, because you could have multiple terrains. Which is the one that you are about to change. And then you can say, okay, how you would like to change it. This time you can add lines, you can add complex shapes. I will go with this option. This is the simple dot option. And then now I just use another option to add the division point, half division point. So I will use this half division point option, and I just click here and here, which results in the half division point. And then let's say that this was 2, this was 1. So let's make this one around, I don't know, 1.8.
Yes, let's try
So
that. So you had 1 point on this side and another one on the opposite side.
Let's make the same thing over here. Now I don't have to use already the center point, because I can find it this way. So this is the same. This is a very simple terrain, but it already tells you how you can change it and the way it looks like. So now we have this, because I added 2 breakpoints which raised the terrain.
Can you show us now how to enlarge the nodes? Maybe it would be better for us to see in the 2D.
Yeah, now the 2D is not that much descriptive, because I cannot see the dots. The dot is literally a non-dimensional dot. It's just a perfect dot. But if I would like to use a cross, then I can enable it then, and I can change the size of the cross. Let's just make it a bit smaller, 100 by 100, for example. Let's say this way, and then you see now there are those tiny crosses, and this tells me where the dots of this terrain.
How could you trim something from the terrain? Maybe you want to have it narrower.
I will show you another example to this later, but now let's just so it will be easier to remember. If I just would like to cut off the corner or something like that, there is an option for the terrain, and the terrain, just as any other option, any other item in ARCHLine, has a local menu. There's a context menu, and it tells me what I can do with this terrain. And there are these elevation information. We will cover pretty much most of these things here. And there is this cut perimeter option. Actually, the same thing you can find here as well. These are the options that I'm talking about. So when I choose this one and I click on the terrain, then the terrain tells me that what's the current perimeter.
Boundary, yes.
And then I can just add, for example, a node here, and just move this node somewhere else, or erase the node, or just change the shape. This won't change the elevations of the terrain. This is just
These are
literally
just
telling
cuts, right?
what's the visible part of this terrain. So I just say, okay, and then now this way I cut off that part of the terrain. But
Perfect.
still that information is there, so if I change the contour to include that part, it will come back. But this way you can, just limit what you would like to see of a larger terrain.
So that's how you create something in ARCHLine. We'll return to this in a second to show how to create something more elaborate, but maybe now we could talk about the import formats, because every now and then, yes?
Yes, and there is one another thing, which I think, at least in my job, it is sometimes happening. Sometimes you have these scanned photographs or landscape images with these specific land lines that tells you the sections of this terrain. I just would like to quickly show you how to do that, because sometimes the dot is not the one that you would like to use.
Yeah.
There is the other option to create the terrain by contour lines.
Oh yes, that's another way to do it.
So in this case, I will go with one of these options. Again, this is the option here again to choose the point and go with the point. But there are other options. You can go with a polygon. You can go with a spline. You can go with other these options. You can even, I will cover this. You can trace an existing DWG file. But now to create something, I will just simply trace something that I imagine there's an image behind. And say, okay, this is at, for example, this will be at 2 meters. There is another one, it's a specific terrain line here. And this is at, for example, 1 meter. And there is another one. And this is at, I don't know, 0.5. So this already builds up a terrain, 0.5 to 1 and 2 meters. And when I recreate the 3D, I will see a different
so the software automatically calculates and draws the 3D model.
And there is a nice slope here because of the way I have created that. So this is also a way. I think these are the two most common ways to create a terrain, and then you can of course change it later.
Right. Now let's look at the import formats. What kind of files we are able to process? Because the usual, like you said in a couple of minutes ago, that you will work on an imported photograph, but sometimes you have other terrain data.
Yeah.
You can import, and obviously
Definitely,
you can work with it. So what formats can we talk about here?
Well, there's a few. I think let's just go through the mostly used ones,
yes.
The most likely used ones, and then for that you have another option. Let me just undo these. At least I will just erase these. I don't need them anymore, and this is the place where I will import those terrains. You will go over to the terrain and create from file. So it's important that now I don't use the file import DWG or DXF or something like that, because that will be processed different way. It will be processed as a drawing. And now I would like to process the content as a terrain. So that's why I'm using the terrain create from file, which is an import method. Just it's a terrain import method. That's the difference here.
This becomes relevant later on when we add the plateaus and roads and things like that, because obviously you could import any kind of 3D model and call it a terrain. But if you want to use the ARCHLine terrain modelers, or you want to get calculations out of that terrain, then that's the only way to go, right?
Yeah. So if you have a model that looks like, with an object that looks like a terrain, that's fine, but it won't tell you, surfaces and square meters.
That's the main distinction.
Like that. Yeah. So let's talk about, for example, one common file format, which is the ASC file format. If I load this one, for example, this contains a terrain part. I just say, okay, let's just import that. Open. Actually, there's the filter. This tells you what sort of terrains you can digest. So let's go with this one. Okay. And it reads it, and you see this point cloud. This was measured by an engineer on the spot, and when you build up the 3D, you will have the 3D model.
Perfect. So it does. So basically, it merges the points into one model, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have to do manually anything else.
Yeah. This is not an object. This is a terrain. So you have the option, just as with any other terrains, to, for example, go and I don't know. Let's just change something which is very visible. You can change the height of a terrain node, for example. This way you can sculpt, you can change the terrain, and you will be able to add the other things that we will talk later on, like roads and zones and things like that. So this is treated as a terrain. This is not just a model. Talking about the terrains that we can import, this was one file format, a very common file format, and it's automatically interpreted as a terrain. Let's just remove that and talk about another one. The other very common file format, I believe, is the, let me just go here, terrain, create from file. And the other one is the CSV, DAT or TXT. These are all containing the same information now, so I will just go with the CSV file. These are file formats that you will get likely from a measure machine. You can talk about those a little bit. What sort of?
Yes, they could be total stations or any kind of device which is able to get you three-dimensional data in numerical format. We'll discuss this later on.
And so it's kind of a point cloud, just treated as a terrain.
Yes.
So we will load this information, and again, the software creates this terrain, and I can visualize it in 3D, and I will get a nice result with those data that in that specific resolution how it was measured. So that's what I see then. At the same, again, I can add it at the building. We will cover that soon. I can make changes. I can recolor it. I can change.
Do we need to scale these?
Not this time, because when I load these sort of file formats, the software has the size information in. It's not only the coordinates like number 1, number 2, and 1 point something and 1 point something. So it is already scaled properly. The one issue could come if you import a DXF file, for example, which is not a big issue. You just need to know about that.
Just one extra step.
Yeah.
But we discussed this earlier when we were importing DXF floor plans. It's the same concept. When you import DXF like that, the software would ask you to define the units. Which again, I think we could recommend the same workflow here. Just import it, see how it turns out, and then you can
That's
fine-tune
right.
it.
That's right. So what I will do now, this is a rather large terrain compared to the other ones, and that's a DXF file. So if I click on it, and I'm going to use the terrain open from file and selected this, so I'm not importing it as a drawing. I import it as a terrain. I click here and I say okay, open, and then this dialog comes up. This is talking about how this terrain will be displayed, which I will change later. As now this is a DXF file. This can be, either imported into your drawing and built into your project, or you can also use it as an extra file, like an external reference. So if someone is still working on that file, you can just wire it into your drawing and just sometimes update it. ARCHLine also handles the extra files. Now I won't do any of these because these two I would like to show you later. And there is another topic which we just covered, the scaling. Now, in case of a DXF file, in case of a DWG file, it is created in units. That unit can be anything. It can be inches, it can be millimeters, it can be anything.
So you have to know what that unit is.
So you need to scale it. And again, in case of processing a DXF file or a DWG file, if you don't know, just import it, measure a distance that you know about, and then when you see it's smaller or larger, then undo it and import it again with the proper scaling. This is actually a scaling option. It's a just multiplying the values. Now I know that this terrain is in meters, so I need to use this option. So I just say okay, and then the terrain is processed.
By clicking on the 3D hammer, you generate the 3D.
Yeah, it appears now. We can see it's way more complex, and it's a larger part of the world. It's a side of a hill or a slope, a bigger slope here as you can see. And I think now we can talk about how we can display terrains.
Oh yes, because that's a very good question to show the elevation data, for instance.
Yes, that's right, and also this is true for the terrains that you yourself create by points, or it's generated by the software. You can, for example, turn on, now what we can see, let's start from there. What can we see here? These are just the dots, nothing, no numbering, no elevation, nothing. So if I would like to display those informations, I go to the terrain and I can change that with the elevation information. There's this query elevation. This is just literally telling you, if you click on a dot, what's the height of it. So if I use that, I click here, and then the software tells me that this is at this
Yes, this will
height.
be later good for creating plateaus, but this is not the whole story. How do you display the elevation?
Yeah, to display it, I will go here and say display elevations. I need to click on the terrain to tell which terrain should be,
Yes.
numbered or generated with this information. These are text information. So now the software literally went through all the dots and generated tiny text there. But before I zoom in, let me just select the other option as well, because I can also display the numbering of these terrain nodes, and then the software again just literally go through from number 1 to, I don't know, 1,000, and it generates these numbers. And now when I zoom in to any of these, I will see that there is the specific
dot
height
and the height value.
and there's the dot, there's the height, and there's the number of this this node, which is again something that you can find in the CSV file or something like that. So you can easily find if it's the proper point. Well, this was the 2D visualization, how you can change the 2D. And there is another option which I think is worth talking about, that how you represent the terrain in the 3D. Now, talking about the terrain representation, this is the default representation,
This
which
triangular.
is the triangulated mesh, we call it. And this you can change to something else. You can go there and say, well, this 3D representation of the terrain should be a contour line or a series of contour lines. In this case, the software generates like, this specific map view sort of elevation lines. Then you can also go there and find that, okay, let's just change this to grid. It's a very dense grid of rectangles and squares, actually.
Is there a way to fine-tune this?
Yeah, you can do that. You can go there and, excuse me, you can go there and find this settings option. Now, this settings option comes with the same icons. And for example, in case of the contour lines, I can tell what's the height difference of the lines.
Which height values should be, which slices should be marked with a line.
Yeah. So I'm just keeping the default, but here you can change it to, I don't know, 2 meters, 5 meters, or anything that you would like to use it. For example, I can imagine that in case of a smaller terrain, which is a smaller landscape of one building site, of a dwelling, for example, you just would like to visualize everything in 10 centimeters grade or something like that. So you can fine tune it here. Let's say okay, and then I get back to this result.
So these are the file formats we are able to import. Obviously, there are others that we are not going to show right now. And obviously, you have to know that there are, if you have a local standard for storing height values, we can tell you right away if that is going to be natively imported into ARCHLine. You have to try it for yourself. But there's another format that we have to talk about, and that is two-dimensional data. Because that almost always happens that you get something like a survey file and it's line work. So how do we process something as a two-dimensional data into a three-dimensional model or a mesh like what we've seen here before? So how does that work?
Yeah, well, the two-dimensional data can be scanned JPEG, a PDF, or something vector graphic like the DWG file. If you have a non-vector content, like an image or a PDF file with non-vector content, you have to import it, scale it, and then work on top of it, like
we did in the beginning.
Yeah, just as I did in the beginning. The calibration is very simple. We already covered that. You just need to tell what's the size of this and this point, and then the software will do the rest. And then when you have something as a vector graphic content, like the DWG file, in that case, now I won't open it as a terrain because I know it's not a terrain. It's a drawing, which contains lines as well of the terrain. So, and even if I would do that, nothing would happen because there's no terrain information in that. So I just simply go there and file, import DWG. So now I have a prepared DWG file here, which is about the terrain lines, and it's about. Let me just quickly find that. It should be here, the files, and it's the terrain files, and I think
it's DXF, isn't it?
Well.
Yeah.
No, it's not. No. It's a DWG file, so I think it's in the other folder. It's here. Let me just quickly load it.
Meanwhile, I'll tell you what we are going to do. So what we'll do is that after we have imported the file, we will see obviously that first we have to scale it. Again, we can refer to that thing that we did in the beginning. We have to look at the scaling and see if that actually makes sense. Once it does, we have to identify the line work, but we don't have to redraw anything. We just have to tell the software which lines to pick, which lines to use to create a three-dimensional, basically terrain model. Because once we get that model going, we are able to add the plateaus, the roads and zones and all other things. But the point is that we have to get that line work into the system, and then we have to make the system identify the lines, because it's not able to differentiate from one line to the other. We have to tell them which lines are the one to work with.
Yeah, so now what I have here is this is the situation. It's actually not just the terrain. So import DWG situation plan again. Okay, so now I scale it up 1,000 times larger. Okay, okay, and then now I just double check whether now it's any better or not.
Yes,
well,
it's
much better. So let's just start working on top of this. So now when you have something like this specific drawing here, you can tell that there are terrain lines, but whatever I do here, nothing will appear because this is just the lines. So to process this, I will go to the building, terrain, create, and by contour lines. But in this case, instead of by simply going through all of these already existing things, I just select the by open chain. These are open chains. These are open series of primitive drawing items. So it's the by open chain. I click here. Let's just zoom in a little bit so I can see the this is 133.5 meters above the sea level. So I click here and I simply type that value.
So you have to
133.5, and then the software understood that that's the terrain line, and I just quickly process the rest.
So basically you have to hunt for open chains, and again, like I said in the beginning, the software is not able to automatically identify these lines. You have to click on them, but you can do it in an order, and at the end, if you don't need that much of a terrain, you can skip a few of them, but by typing in the numbers and by identifying the correct lines, you're able to define where the terrain actually goes. Now, like you said in the beginning, scaling is very, very important in this regard, but there's another issue coming up, and that is connected to the sea level, basically measurements, because that would influence how your model would appear, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, so now, as I'm finished, I just hit enter twice, or just hit the escape key because I already have the lines traced, and then I build up the terrain. Now the terrain is represented by level lines, but it's not because I have created it.
But because of the setting,
lines,
right?
But because of the settings. So what to do with this terrain? With this terrain, there are many options we can do. First things first. Everything that I have created is measured above the sea level. So now I positioned this whole area somewhere in relation to the sea level in the world, as proper as it was originally. So now what I have created, I actually literally created a virtual copy of that original terrain, which was measured by this engineer on site. Now I can change a few things on this terrain, actually quite a few. I can go to the terrain and there are my options. I can create plateaus, roads, zones, and I can add details. Let's go sequentially. So what about the plateau? What's that? A plateau is typically a flat ground that is cut or added to the terrain. And the software will solve this. You only need to tell the software where is this flat ground. You can use it for many purposes. This could be a building site. This could be just simply an elevated area of this terrain. But what you need to tell is that you would like to add, modify, or something. First things first, of course, I have to add one. So I tell the software, okay, I would like to add a plateau to this terrain. So I select the terrain, and then I just quickly, trace this contour line. I can also select this area. I just would like to quickly sketch this same contour. And then when I'm done,
what do you do next?
Now I have to tell where is this this flat ground measured from the sea level. Now this is why the engineer told that 0.0, this is where this area will be, is at this specific elevation. So I just use the same elevation. That will be the 0 level for me now, because I will use it as a flat ground for the building, for example. So I just say, okay, this is at the same specific level, and then now I need to set up the slope. Now this area is obviously not the same as the terrain, so someplace I need to extend it, and someplace I need to cut into the terrain to create, and those slopes are the things that I'm about to set here. If the slope is 0, now in case of a terrain, when slope is 0, it's not horizontal, it's vertical. So if you would like to decrease the slope, you need to give a larger angle, like for example, I will just add 45-degree angle.
Yes.
Then I say OK, and then now I have this option here. So now that's the flat ground, that's the plateau, cut into the ground here, 45-degree angle slope, and extended or added to the ground here when it was necessary. So it's not just sticking out of the terrain like, just something.
I see, yes.
Like a flat plate, but it's already, worked together with the terrain, worked into the terrain. So now, what could be changed? Now, obviously...
Well, one thing that comes to mind is that if there's going to be a supporting wall over there, then maybe you want to change the inclination of the slope.
Yeah. This would be very idealistic when the slope is everywhere the same. So obviously I need to be able to change the slope. So what I will do, I will just use this as a small, because we can see the result much better here. So I just click here on the edge of this terrain area, this plateau, and then I tell the software now what I'm thinking about is the terrain. I would like to work with the terrain, and then in case of the terrain, I just go to the local menu, and then now the software understands that this is an edge of a plateau, so I should be able to change things with that plateau, change the material. I will show you that. And change slope on all the sides or only on this side. And these same things I can find here. There is this plateau, modify slope everywhere, and modify slope only on this side. So I will use this one. I click here, and well, that's right. I just change it back to vertical, which was 0. So I just click. I just enter 0, and then I go. This is already done.
Just have to select the sides manually.
And this here should be 0 again. I think now that's all. I'm fine with that. And see now those where I just hit enter.
Extended back.
Those are changed back to the vertical. So now, this way you can just change the inclination everywhere, side by side, and then you can create and sculpt or carve this thing into the terrain the way you want.
Can we look at the terrain tool some more, see what's next on the list?
Yeah, well, there is an option which is called the modify material, and the rest I won't show because obviously we can erase a terrain plateau and modify slopes the other way. So I just use the modify material. I can click on this terrain area, and then let's just change it to, I don't know, this bright material,
so we can see it better. Yes.
So this way you can set up the flat ground material, and then you can add anything else.
How are roads different?
The roads are the following tool. This is working in the same manner. You just click on add. You set up the terrain itself where you would like to carve your road into, and then you can tell that, well, for example, this road starts from here or here from the edge, and you can say that, well, let's just start from here. And then I just, make a little straight part of this road,
sort of perpendicular to the plateau, and then
I just add the smooth arc, to turn this road around, and then there will be another arc, for example, like that, and there will be another arc, go someplace like this. So this way you can set up the path of this road. And when you are done, you can tell the width of this road. This road will be, let's just make it, for example, 3,000.
Meters, yes.
3,000, and that's fine. And then now there's the option when I can set up the elevations of this road height. So this is kind of similar when you design a railing, and you tell the software that the railing is starting at this point, and then it decreases, and then it decreases, or something like that. Sometimes the software does it automatically, but you can do it manually as well. So now the software, assuming that it's starting from this specific point, set up this specific height for this road, and if you do not change it, it will just continue going on this same height. But in this case, because the terrain is having this specific slope, it will need too much of the terrain to extend itself. So I will just go with this one. That's fine. That's fine. This should be, I don't know, a little bit lower. 133.
Do you have to add that node by node, or you could just straight away go to the end?
No, I need to, see, this wasn't changed, so I need to change the rest then. That this should be 133, and this will be 133 again. Just make it simple, 133, yeah. So when I hit enter, the software generates this road on the 2D, and it will generate it in the 3D as well. Let me just rebuild the 3D. And then when you see that, oh, for some reason it was not generated now. So let me just undo this and redo again. So let's just create a terrain, road, add to this terrain. Yeah, this is a terrain. And then this time I will just go with a simpler version. Smooth arc.
And so you don't have to get too fancy with your roads.
Yeah, maybe I just created something that it was not being able to, draft. So let's just go with this, with the same value. Let's just change this. 1, 3, 3, 5, 1, 3, 3. Well, let's just keep it as it is. I think that's the last point is the one that makes it different. And then now it generates. Yeah.
Can we zoom in to see the result?
So now it's too deep carved in the in the terrain.
But hold on for a second. We can see the point here is that it either carved into the surface or extended to the terrain. So that's what we wanted to see. But there's another thing. You might want to change the elevation, but this is not important at this point, because what I want to see is the cross section of the road.
Well, now the cross section is just a flat. This is, I think, quite very well visible here. It's it's just a flat surface. But if I would like to change that, I can go here. There are the road options here, and you can change the section profile. You can modify the section profile. If I click on this one, let's just do this in the 2D because I think it will be easier here. Let's just zoom here. So terrain, road, and add section profile to this one. So I can lay it out and then tell that, for example, let's just give it this classic kind of natural curve, which nearly all the roads, at least the asphalt roads, have.
Yes.
So now I have this, and let's just make it a bit
let's
more.
Add a gutter, maybe.
Kind of, yeah, like on the sides. You can use an existing drawing, or an existing.
Oh, definitely, you can pick up an existing chain for
or
sure.
Something like that. I just keep it simple now, so you can get the idea how this works. You can be much more specific than I am now. So you can say that, okay, this is done. Enter, and
we can see that it's being cut in.
So that's carved this way into the road, and it's especially when we go here, we can see it's happening nicely.
There's another tool in the terrain options, and that is the zones. But I always want to know, how are those different from plateaus? Because they should be the same, right? So you are going to distribute or divide the terrain piece to smaller parts. How do they behave?
Well, there is another thing before we go into that. I would like to show you at least two other things with this road. Obviously, you can also change the material of this road. You can go and find that, okay, this road is, for example, something like a darker area, and then the software will just change that material. And there's a few of these interesting options that you can. Here you can change the contour, you can change the edit, modify the node height, and you can even edit this whole thing around. See, this way.
I see. So you can elevate it.
You can elevate it to the specific height that you would like to start from, and you can easily change it the way you want. See, now it has a nice slope. I can, further change it, but now I'm fine with this. And then you can say, okay, done, finish it, and then you can easily sketch it. So it's kind of, when the terrain design is created, you can see the breakpoints and you can see the terrain cross section, and you can work with that. So what was the other one?
Zones. About zones. It's how are the zone tools different from the plateau tools?
The zone. Let's just create a zone, and then I can show you the options. So as you can see, it's obviously a different option. Now there is a reason to that. The create zone offers, again, selecting the terrain, and then I will use this specific area. This is kind of the landscape over here. I mean, it's a property boundary, for example, and then I will just sketch it around. It's very simple, and then I have this option here. Let's just distinguish it with a different color.
Something very bright.
Let's just go with this one because it was easy to see. Okay, so this will be, the owner is a terrain. That means this belongs to the terrain, which is obvious. You can name it some way. Like you can tell that this is, for example, the garden or something like that. You can either fit this to the terrain, which means the terrain has a specific shape, and this will be kind of an overpaint in this area. I will use this later. You can make a slanted surface, which is kind of a creation of a slope. You can do it this way, you can do the other way around, but this is also an option. You can create a horizontal surface, and then I think I will show you this, because this seems to be similar to how the plateau works. But it's a bit different. So now I will just use the same value that I used before. It's it's in millimeters, so it's 4, yeah. 600, and I think another 0, like that.
Yeah, I think maybe you have one extra. No,
One
sorry,
extra.
no, you're right.
Is
You're
it
right.
okay?
Yes, it should be.
So this is perhaps there's an extra 0. I'm so bad.
We'll
at
see.
this.
We'll see. We'll see in a second.
And
It's trial and
so
error, right?
This is the horizontal surface elevation. That means this area is at this specific level. So this should be the same as the zone. But what happens? When you do that, the software is trying to draft that, and then it actually creates the horizontal area. You can
by
see like
extending.
that. But it is morphing the terrain to this level instead of adding slopes, which is, you know, job of the workers to create the slope. But this is kind of, you know, like some natural morph into that level. So that's the difference. You can morph the terrain to a specific level, or you can work the terrain to a specific level with you know, like road work or terrain work.
I see.
That's the difference between the two. And now I will show you this other one. I will turn this to I don't know, like a path or something like that. Again, I use the terrain create zone here, and then I just, you know, just quickly follow the contour of this area. I will use a dark tone here. This is actually, it's telling me it's a private road. But for again, I could use the road tool, but this is so amorph. It's not having this nice thing. So I will just use let's go with this dark area, and let's make it, I don't know, driveway or something like that for the garage. And there is the soil, and I will just use the fit to terrain option. That's what I told to use. Okay. So now the software generates this zone, and it's actually not changing anything.
Also, it's just painted surface, right?
It's just painting that surface, yeah. You can imagine using this for garden areas, or just, you know, add some sand, like a shore, or something like that. So this way you can recolor, you can paint areas of this terrain to highlight areas, or either for, you know, visual purposes or for engineering purposes, which will come at the end when we, you know, make this listing out of this thing.
Perfect. There's one thing that's connected to that, and that is building volumes.
Yeah.
They are not 100% terrain tools, but I think this is the scenario where you would actually use them. And they are very useful for marking properties that you can see here. So you see these rectangles, these are supposed to represent the neighboring buildings.
Yeah.
Obviously, you could redraw them, so you could use the wall and roof tools, but you don't really need parametric objects for that. You just need to have some kind of building mass over there.
Yeah, so, well, let's talk about that now. A building volume is literally a sketch of a building, so you don't have to download buildings or create a building just because there's a neighboring shape that you would like to represent. Obviously, if you want, you can, but if it's just a cube or the, you know, the volume of that building, you can make it easy and go with this building volume option. This can be used in the urban areas, you know, when you would like to just simply study the sun shading, how it affects your land. It's very important in specific areas. Sometimes you have to prove it some way, and this is a good option. So you just simply trace something that is assumed to be a building, and then you can set up the shape. Now, by default, it will be kind of a rectangular shape brick like this here. And then you can say that, well, if there is a roof inclination, what's that? You will never measure that, but you can at least guess how that looks like. And then you can say, well, the maximum building height should be, I don't know, around 8,000 millimeters. That's the thing that I can see here, for example. And then the building elevation is perhaps 3,000 millimeters. So let's just make it 3,000. So update. So now I have this, and there's only one slope because I didn't update this for all the sites, and when I do that, I get this classic building shape. And then if I just would like to change one or the other side of this building, I can go back and say, okay, this is 0.
You can make it as a gable end, right?
And then well, like this. So you can easily sketch a building volume like this. So once you are done with that, okay, I'm happy with this shape. Okay, then the software creates this shape here, and then, well, there is a problem here.
Yes, definitely. That's something that we wanted to talk about anyway, but here's the issue. Why is that model down there? It's for the simple reason is that when we define the contour lines and turn them into three-dimensional terrain lines, we define that they are going to be 130 something meters above sea level.
Yeah, that's
but everything else stays at 0, right? So if you are going to draw additional walls or elements to this drawing, they are going to be put down to the 0 level, far below the model. Now, how do you bring them to a common ground?
And this same thing happens when you already have a building and you import terrain. They are not necessarily matched together already.
Yes.
Because this is not controlled by the terrain. It's controlled by the elevation settings of your project. If you do not set up the elevation settings of your project, everything that you create lands at 0. Except the terrain, because in case of designing the terrain, you already tell where they are. So if you would like to fix something like this, there is one single easy step to fix it. You only need to go back to the 2D, find the elevation management, the floor management, and tell the software where this 0, the ground floor 0, should be. And this is adjusted here, the building elevation above sea level in meters. So now this should be this value if I would like to be correct.
134.6.
So this is how I fix it. I just tell the software that 0 is actually not at 0, is at this point. So I just do it, and then I rebuild the 3D, and then now it automatically falls to 0. But in this case, of course, it's still not good.
Now it's on the same level as the plateau, but we want to have it a little bit higher.
If I just simply make a copy of that, you will see that if it would be on the plateau, it would be much better. But I just just remove that, and then select this here, and then say, okay, let's just elevate it simply, just visually. Because
visually, yes.
Because now it's not that much of an important thing to millimeter exactly match it with the terrain. It's just a visual thing that I'm about to do. Of course, when I design my building, it should fall to the proper place, but a sketch like this is fine, just to fine-tune like this.
Before you told us about this sun excess and shadows that you have to model surrounding buildings in certain markets in certain geographical areas. Yeah. But maybe you can show us what kind of data we can get out of this model?
Okay, so this is something that you can find in View. And there in View, you will find this shadow menu. And the shadow menu contains many other interesting options, but now we are interested in solar access. Now the software will tell me that this is not working in image mode. This is where you can see this, it's image mode. Image mode means the model is like this. You can handle it fluidly as an image content. You have two options. Either you can switch from image to vector there and back, or if you forgot about that, no problem, no worries. You just click here, and the software will tell it for you that
that you have to.
It cannot be done only if I just change it to the proper visualization style, and then you can determine when you would like to see this in action.
Yes.
And you can, of course, the same way as we covered before, you can set up the geolocation of
the north direction
and everything
the
else.
GPS data.
Those are considered proper now. And then now I say, okay, set up the date and time, and there will be a morning color and an evening color. Let's say the morning color is something nice orange, and the evening color is kind of a bluish something. Yes. And then I can set up how the shadows, the shade will be drafted. I would like to go with this shadow with contour lines and hatch. And then I can also change it to, instead of a pattern, I would like to see a nice solid color inside. And then I just would like to draft it now everywhere, because there are not so many surfaces, so I'm fine if the software just calculates it everywhere. And I think I would like to go with something like this, so I just would like to draft something with hidden lines, no shading, no textures, nothing else, no colors, just the colors of the shadows. Okay, I think I'm done. So it will be at September 6th, and from morning 8 till the afternoon 16:30. So I say, okay, let's just do that. And now the software starts the calculation. See, it generates how the sun is moving and generates this shadow contours. And then now when it's done, it's just, slicing the problem into smaller pieces, and it calculates the result. And then when it's done, you will see a nice colored version, like a drawing version. You can use it from an external-metric view, like I do now. You can set up a top view and view it from that angle.
Yes.
Front views. You can use it as a solution for example, elevation representation as well.
So it could be part of your documentation.
Yeah, it will be part of your documentation. You can make a copy of it. You can paste it on the plot layout, and you can print it into a PDF file. And this is what you get at the end. Based on my settings, I get this. So I know that the sun starts from here, moves around like this, and that's the first shadow at 8, and that's the last shadow at 4:13. And if my building is here, I can see this other neighboring building has no effect on my building. And the same way I can check if my building has effect on the other buildings.
We already started to talk about the connection between building and terrain when we talked about the sea level, but let's discuss other things, how the buildings interact with the terrain. Because that's one of the reasons why you would not use standard three-dimensional meshes for these things. You need to model the terrains as terrains because they have certain interactions with the buildings, right?
Yeah, for example, to use a slab or something like that. Okay, so let's just save this because I will use this later for other purposes. I just save this project as I don't know, my terrain. My terrain, it's fine. Let's just go there. I just turn off the shadow now. I don't need it anymore. And then to create, let's just first create a wall so you will understand how a building builds up on top of this.
Mind you that we already adjusted the project
so
zero levels.
So I just go with 3 simple walls.
I think you have
just
to flip
need
it.
to change that. Yeah, I need to flip it. So I just go here, here, and here. And then when I'm done, perhaps my settings are not perfect because I
think
cannot
they are
see them.
in the.
See, they are over there. So something went sideways here because, there's a problem is that I'm at the basement level here and I should create these walls at the other level.
Yeah, but you can copy the elements to the...
Yeah, so what I will do, I just select this, and this. These are the walls, this and this. And I just, copy them or move them here to the ground floor. And now it's fine.
There you go.
And the same way I can, adjust and create a slab as well. Now, as you can see, there is one another specific thing, and I think it's good that I made this mistake because then now I can point out that the terrain is a bit different to the walls. The terrain is by default visible at all the levels. As you can see, when I'm going up and down.
Oh, it's always there.
It's always there. You can disable this, but that's the default setting. So now, going back to what you wanted to ask,
how do we
like
cut
to
the
create, for example, something that's carved as a foundation or something like that? I will use I could use the wall as a foundation tool, but now because of this specific purpose, I will use the slab, and there is this open foundation tool, for example, which actually allows me to set up a width for this foundation that should be around, let's say, 300 millimeters. And then I started it in the 3D, so I go back to the 2D. So
it would be easier to do to the 3D.
It will be definitely easier now. Okay, so now I just, let's go around here and carve this into, let's imagine that there are walls coming on top of this thing. So I just drafted this here, say, okay, I'm done. And then what makes this as a foundation? What turns this into a foundation? Because now it's just a regular slab, and I can easily see that there's even a Z-fight, which I don't like. So how to carve it into the terrain? There's one setting that does everything. So you go to the settings of this slab, and there's this extract slab from terrains. Okay. And then when you update the terrain, either by clicking on the 3D hammer or just go into the properties and say okay, then the software already makes this connection between the two. So now there is no overlapping, no Z-fight. There is only this here, and there is only the terrain, and they are not overlapping each other. By simply quickly hiding this here, let's just say isolate this and hide this object for a while.
We
I can see that
it's
there's a
gap
nice
that leaves
gap there.
behind.
It's a that's a hole carved into it. So this is how it looks like then.
Perfect. How about integration with Google Maps? That's something that we wanted to discuss earlier on.
Yeah, about Google Maps. If you would like to, for this I have another model. Let's just open that here, and I think it's the model itself. Please help me a little bit. It's here.
Yeah.
So that's the one.
That's the.
I open this, and
Well, we don't need to save this.
I
We already saved
I
it
already
before.
saved the one that I would like to use. So about the Google Maps. Now I have a building, so I will go from the other way around. When I already have something and I import the Google Maps.
Yes, you want to have a piece of a terrain and put your building onto it.
Yeah, first things first, I need to set up the project location and the north direction. So I just set up the project location someplace on Earth. We usually use this location for demo purposes. It's in Berg, and and it's this specific location. And let's just find it. It's if I did not do a typo, I should be able to find it. But for some reason, I cannot go there now. It's
Maybe you
the
should
same.
just look for Berg.
Yeah, let's just go to Berg first. Yeah, that's it. And then let's go to. Well, that's something that we have to ask Google why I cannot find it now, because it was there before. And anyway, if I just find the location, this is where I set my location, and then I can set up the
I think there's a vacant lot over there.
Yeah, I will just put it over there. So when I move my mouse somewhere, this is how I define where this piece of building that I create with its specific corner point, with this origin point, will be aligned to. So let's just place it over here and say, okay, that's it. Okay. And then now the location is set. I set up the north direction, and then when I would like to process this as a terrain, I only need to go to import map as terrain and tell the resolution. Now, if it's a kind of a slow plan or not too many variations of the terrain appear, then medium is fine. But if there are a lot of details, then you should go with high.
Yes. Don't forget that you can also import the map as an image. So
yes,
you don't need topographical data,
now,
but now we do. So
now I go to, this is satellite. So this is a Hungarian, but this means satellite and map view. So you can switch between the two, and then you can zoom in. And when you zoom in, you actually tell that from this to this area is the one that you want to have import. So not the whole world, of course, but only the one that you see here. And then you can say, okay, let's just digest that and process it as a terrain. And the software processes the Google Maps data, reads the height, the elevations, and then it generates this terrain, creates the necessary information, and snaps it below my.
And you can see that the building is on top of it because that's why we put the marker.
Yeah, that's it. So that's exactly how I match the two together. This is a terrain with a specific satellite view, and there's this view here. Now I go to the axonometric view, and see now I don't have any problem with the building snapping to the ground.
So it's automatically snapped there?
Because yes, when you import something from the Google Maps, the software automatically reads this origin level, and then it auto snaps the building together with the terrain, so you don't have to worry about that. If you would like to, you can change it the same way. You can go back to the 2D and you can change this value here if you are not fine with that, but the software will automatically snap them together.
And also don't forget that you can, as we did before, you can change the texture or the size of this piece of terrain.
Yes, that's
but
right.
I think that's enough for demonstration. Let's talk about the getting data and numerical value out of this model. Not this one, but maybe if you could.
That's the reason I saved this, because now we have a few zones, roads, and I generated quite a few parts of this terrain. So let's just get back here. So how this looks like as an Excel file when I export information. This is in the documentation, quantity takeoff, and Excel list. That's what I would like to create, and I definitely would like to create the terrain calculation. This terrain calculation will fall into this terrain Excel as fine. So I just save it, and then the software generates this information, turns into an Excel file. And the first is again a summary. So this is just the generic information of the terrain. It's not telling me much now. It's just the generic area and the volume. And then now comes the road. I only have one road designed with the road tool. So I have only one information here, and about the plateau, I have this information
here. But you have all the volumes. That's great, because then you have all the numbers that you have to work with.
Yeah, and it is actually telling me the fill volume and the cut volume, because I have filled a part and cut something out of the terrain, and that's the volume I removed and filled into the this part.
Perfect. That's actually what we wanted to discuss regarding the ARCHLine.XP terrain tools. So we showed you how to use data imported and how to process data that you imported. That is actually the last webinar of the year, so we are not going to have any more until January, when we are going to return with other exciting topics regarding ARCHLine. But as a goodbye, there's one thing what I want to point out, and that is a year-ending promotion that we have right now. As you can see on the screen, we have a 20% discount from the full perpetual licenses. So like we said before, we have perpetual licenses, not subscription models. So if you want to buy the software as a one-off payment and use it indefinitely, there's an option for that. We had that before as well, but now we have a 20% discount with a 6 monthly installment plan. You can check out the prices on the website. This offer is valid until the 14th of December. So if you want to embark on, yes, the link is below. If you want to embark on starting using ARCHLine and try all these wonderful things that Ilya just demonstrated, then that's the way to go. Or the previous ones. Or the previous ones. Or the ones that we are going to show you starting from January.
Yeah.
For everyone listening, and for those of you who listened to us before, thank you very much for your attention. We'll be back with other shows. If you have any suggestions in terms of what to talk about or things that you feel should be elaborated some more, let us know. As always, thank you very much for your attention. See you next time.
And please like the video if you liked it.
Yes, yes.
Bye.
And enjoy the holidays.
Yes.
Bye-bye.